How to turn a pigeon into a compulsive gambler. So you've probably heard the work of behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner. Go way back to a psychology class, who learned about operant conditioning, in which you can condition animals with food to come back and press the lever when they get food because you condition them to get the reward for food. Well, another psychologist a couple of decades ago decided to take that work a little bit further, and he started to train pigeons with food. And he said, what happens in the pigeons when we insert a little bit of uncertainty into the equation and a little bit of fear into their lives? So he set up an experiment where the pigeons had the option of playing one or two games. They could press one of two buttons with their little beak, okay? Game number one was the game that was very predictable. They could come and they could peck the little button. And every other time they pecked the button, 50% of the time, they would get 15 pieces of food. So peck, 15 pieces of food. Peck, no food. Peck, 15 pieces of food. Peck, no food. You get it, right? Every other 15 pieces of food. Game one. Or they could choose game two. Game two, they would peck the button, and when they got the food, they would get 20 pieces of food. More food. Except this time, they would only get food every about 20% of the time, and it was completely random. And so they may go, peck, no food, peck, no food, peck, lots of food, peck, no food, peck, lots of food. And then the next time they come back to option B, right? Peck, lots of food, peck, no food, peck, no food, peck, no food, peck, lots of food. So random, more food, only 20% of the time. And so he'd give the pigeons the option. After a while, he noticed a pattern, that the pigeons chose regularly one of the two games. Do you want to guess which one they chose? Okay, no, wait. Before you guess, let me give you another little piece of information, okay? If you do the math and make a logical, rational decision, if you choose game A, 100 pecks of the button will give you 750 pieces of food. If you choose game B, 100 pecks of the button will give you 450 pieces of food. Okay? So, game B, 450. Game A, 750. Guess which game the pigeons chose 97% of the time? B. Why? Because they're bird brains. Well, it just so happens that that was terrible. But by the way, it wasn't the birds. When the test was repeated with all different kinds of animals, same results. In fact, they discovered that they could increase the food in game A like several 100%, and they would still go after game B. Why? Well, the prevailing theory is this: that the way our brains are wired to keep like our will to live is that when we do something that results in food is good and necessary for survival. And our brains will release a shot of dopamine, the pleasure hormone that says, ooh, that feels good, which helps us to reward the thing that gives us food. Here's what researchers are discovering about dopamine, the reward chemical in your brain. The dopamine peaks when we don't know if we're going to get the reward. In other words, in moments of uncertainty and fear, the dopamine off the charts. Think about what that means. As fear, scarcity, and uncertainty increase, good decision-making decreases. And it's our bodies that are doing it to us. And we'll gamble on shortcuts and short-term compromises. And even though you and I are no bird brain, well, at least you're not, we can think of times when we made short-term bad decisions out of fear and uncertainty. And in those moments, maybe it was tempting to think that God is somehow out to get you, tempting you to fail or working against you. making you prove yourself, but that is simply not the case. In fact, when we go all the way to the New Testament, the Apostle Paul, reflecting on what it is that God has done for us through Christ, when he reflects on our human condition and why it is that we make bad decisions and what is going on inside of us, listen to what he said, what he writes in Romans chapter 8, starting verse 18. He says, "Look, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed to us sometime in the future." He says, when we think about the pile of food that is waiting for us in the future, it is so much better and outweighs whatever suffering we're going through right now. But we somehow have to make the decisions that lead to long-term, not just short-term satisfaction